Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 871. Good grief. For the 15th of June 2025, Richard Saunders coming to you from Sydney, Australia. Wintry. Yes, what's out the window at the moment? Some clouds in the sky, a bit of blue sky. It's a very nice wintry day here in Sydney. So if you're in the southern hemisphere like me, maybe you're in the southern bit of Australia, I hope you're having a warm winter. As in, I hope you're rugged up. Electric blanket, anybody? Coming up on this week's show, the first report is from somewhere in the world which does get very wintry. Oh my goodness me. Edmonton, Canada, in Alberta. And Adrienne Hill, a little while ago, attended Skepticamp, and she caught up with Rodney Schmaltz from McEwan University and some of his students. Now, this is a university I would very much like to give a lecture at. A talk about pseudoscience, the paranormal, that sort of thing. More about that soon. And Adrienne also catches up with Coleman Watts. Following that, talking about pseudoscience, I look at pseudoscience. What is pseudoscience? What are its hallmarks? And we hear a little bit about this from James the Amazing Randy. And then it's Kat McLeod, for crying out loud, looking at another pseudoscience, cereology. No, that's not cornflakes. That's looking at crop circles and people who seriously investigate this from a pseudoscientific point of view. Seriously, from a pseudoscientific point of view, can you have such a thing? Sometimes call themselves cereologists. What's happening with crop circles today? We find out with Kat McLeod. And I really enjoyed Kat's recent Skeptoid episode. If you haven't heard that, have a look, have a listen. And I was very pleased in the last week to do a Skeptoid episode myself. Then to round off the show, it's back to the TROVE Archives, or archives from other newspapers from around the world. And this week we're looking at ESP, extrasensory perception. And you'll hear me talk about a documentary from the early 80s on the BBC, then repackaged and revoiced for Nova in the United States. Now, this is called Case of ESP, but in my reading of the Trove segment today, my brain sort of played a trick, and I had it in my mind that it was called the Case for ESP. So ignore it when I say that. The show is called Case of ESP, but I'll link to that video in this week's show notes. It goes for over an hour, and I actually sat down and I watched it. Whew, boy. The word that comes to mind is credulous. Stay tuned, or don't switch off, or keep listening at the end of the episode for more announcements on me. How many of you listen to me at double speed, or the show at I Wonder? I tried doing that with some other podcasts, and even this one, and yeah, it works. It's all right, I suppose. Maybe I should speak quicker. Anyway, now it's time for me to run downstairs, have a nice piece of sourdough toast with butter and quince jam and salmon and avocado and a coffee. I can think of more things, but maybe I should just leave it at that. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. You can count on Adrienne with Adrienne Hill.
Hello everyone, this is Adrienne Hill from Skookum Studios in Calgary, Canada. I have a lot of catching up to do. I have a lot of material in the works, and today I am going back to the beginning of May when we had a Skepticamp in Edmonton. And I'm going to bring you interviews with Rodney Schmaltz's student presenters from McEwan University. They are Sebastian Toews, Dawson VonStein, and DJ Crossland. plus an impromptu interview with Coleman Watts at the head of the Johnson Canyon Trail just outside of Banff, Alberta. The last time I interviewed Coleman for the show was in Iceland last year, and something really amazing happened right after I finished the interview with him. Coleman's wife, Danielle, came running over and told us that there was a grizzly bear in a field beyond the back of the parking lot. And we did a very touristy thing. We walked towards the reported sighting, though cautiously. Luckily, the national park wardens were there to monitor the situation, and we were able to watch the amazing, though somewhat terrifying, animal eating grass from a somewhat safe distance until the bear started moving in our direction, at which time the wardens told us to return to our vehicles. Hello everybody, this is Adrienne Hill, and I'm right now in McEwan University in Edmonton, and I'm standing here with 3 of the student speakers from the university who just spoke at our inaugural Skepticamp. And please make sure you introduce yourself first and then tell us what your talk was.
I'm Sebastian Toews. I was talking about critical thinking and pseudoscience and how to use a pseudoscientific activity to increase critical thinking skills.
Yeah, it was really interesting. And you picked dowsing, which is very close to Richard Saunders' heart. He loves to do dowsing examples. He actually did that at our Week in Reason conference last year, and he did a double blind. From what I understand, you haven't done the experiment yet.
That's right. Yeah, I haven't done it yet. It's in starting it next week.
And can you describe briefly the protocol that you're going to use?
So we are going to be using 3 conditions. We're going to have the participants try to use a dowsing task where they can see the water, and then we'll have one condition where they are not aware of where the water is, and then we will see if that decreases pseudoscientific beliefs.
Thank you. Yeah, that's going to be very interesting. I can't wait to see the results to that. Maybe you can come back on once you've finished the experiment.
Yeah, I would love that. That'd be awesome.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm Dawson VonStein, and my talk was on metacognition and actively open-minded thinking and how they can potentially counter misinformation beliefs.
I'm just trying to remember, there was one thing that really made me laugh, one of your slides. Oh, shoot, it just left my head.
There was Justin Trudeau in the House of Commons taking his chair out. Yeah.
That was wonderful, and he has a really interesting expression on his face, correct?
Yeah, very, very interesting. Sticking his tongue out. For a politician in the House of Commons, it's very strange.
If you were raised in his father's generation, like I was, you would not think that was strange. His father did a pirouette behind the Queen when he was Prime Minister. You've actually conducted your experiment, correct? And what did you find?
We found that having higher levels of metacognitive awareness does actually not lead to a reduction in misinformation beliefs, but it does actually lead to higher levels of health misinformation, which is contrary to what we had thought.
And that was fascinating to me, and that kind of in some ways explains why there is such a problem with health misinformation.
Yeah, the industry is absolutely flooded with information, and it's just the problem of trying to figure out what's the key ticking for individuals who are looking at that information. How can we kind of sort that out now that we've seen that awareness is not the key?
Yeah, it was such an interesting talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And finally here.
Hi, I'm DJ Crossland, and my study was on belief in pseudoscience and personality traits, just trying to understand the underlying mechanisms of what drives belief in pseudoscience.
I don't think I've ever seen those triangles. Can you talk a little bit about those triangles that you talked about, the triads?
So we use the light triad, which they're positive traits. It's new, so it hasn't been used a lot in literature. So we're kind of just hoping to add to the literature with that one. And it counterbalances the dark triad, which is quite well known. And actually, there's a dark tetrad now that we did not use, but maybe in the future. So negative traits like psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism, which we're all pretty familiar with.
Yeah, for sure. And what have you found with regards to pseudoscience?
So essentially, people that have higher pseudoscientific beliefs tend to be more selfish, but that's usually mediated by the dark triad traits. As for the light triad traits, in our follow-up study, we found that there was actually no relationship there.
The other thing that I found interesting was the whole selfishness talk that you had with regards to believing in pseudoscience. I'd never heard that before. That was new to me.
Yeah, well, it would make sense because some forms of pseudoscience, like it would be understandable, like with it being like pathological, right? And how that would relate to things like narcissism or even psychopathy, and how that might drive some of those pseudoscientific beliefs, especially the ones that are more harmful, like conspiracy theories.
And you talked as well, or maybe all three of you did, I can't remember, about how IQ does not predict the belief. In fact, it was the inverse of what most people think. People think, oh, they're so stupid, when in fact they're quite intelligent.
Yeah, that's just because they're good at backing up their own points, but they're not really good at understanding the perceptions of others.
I was so excited to see you because I saw you speak at the Sunday Papers at PsyCon a couple years ago.
Yes, and we were there. We were there this year as well, but I did the poster presentation for LillyCon.
I may have seen you in the big, vast crowd, but I actually saw you speak 2 years ago, I guess.
Yeah, it was 2 years ago now.
And that's how I met Rodney.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much, all three of you. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill, signing off. Hello, everybody. This is Adrienne Hill, and right now I'm standing right by the Bow River in Banff, Alberta. I run into this person in the oddest locations. The last time I saw him in person, it was in Iceland. Who did I run into here?
Hey, Adrienne, it's Coleman Watts again.
Lovely to hang out with you and your wife, Danielle. It's been really fun.
And Banff is absolutely beautiful. Everyone should come and see this.
It is. It's second to none. We've been hiking. We have been up the gondola. We have been very lucky with the weather.
Absolutely. It's beautiful here.
And what's kind of fun, too, besides the Herman the Merman that we just got to witness,
I was going to say, I just met Herman, who is a merman who apparently is in charge of sinking boats sometimes, was his occupation until they caught him.
Yes, that's right. Around 1915 on Lake Minnewanka, which is a beautiful place that we went to earlier today.
It is. It's beautiful, and I didn't see anything strange there. All the mermen have been caught.
And the lake was remarkably calm. And so therefore, Herman caused it, I guess.
Thanks, Herman.
And not only that, but a year ago around this time, I interviewed Jonathan Jarry in Banff, and you've been doing some interesting work with him.
I did run into Jonathan Jarry thanks to a mutual friend named Adrienne. I met Jonathan online. He promised that I would not meet him in person unless I came to Canada because he's not going to the US right now. We had a fascinating conversation about a wellness influencer, a very rich and famous wellness influencer named Joe Mercola. Jonathan had gotten his hands on some secret Zoom recordings between Joe and his psychic advisor, Balan, who is an interdimensional entity or just a guy from New York who answers his questions with yes and we think so and you're very smart, Mr. Joe Mercola. And he's in the process of maybe taking over his business. Anyway, Jonathan made a really incredible video about that, and I made a follow-up video which I hope is entertaining as well. And wow, watching those tapes was a brain-melting experience.
Those leaked tapes that Jonathan Jarry got a hold of, you were able to watch. Did you watch all 50 plus hours?
I did not. There were more than 50 hours, and I could not possibly get through it. It was about 2.5 hours per Zoom call, and there were 100 of them. So, no, what I did is some keyword searches to look for phrases that he was using frequently, like genius. I found at least 20 occurrences of Joe calling himself a genius or Balan calling him a genius. I found several references to Joe referring to his comparing himself to Jesus Christ. I found some very strange takes with Joe believing himself to be a 29-year-old when he is in fact 70. He believes that his health regimen has actually reversed his age, Benjamin Button style. While if you actually look at those tapes, he looks more like 80, I think, but
I think he looks like Gollum, actually.
I did have to put a little clip of Gollum in there just for comparison purposes because, well, it's precious. What can I say?
You're brilliant, Coleman. And if you haven't seen his video, please do check it out. Can you tell everybody how to find your work and contact you if needed?
Sure, if you go to YouTube and type in the letter @ Think This Through channel, I'll pop up my latest video, or you can type in Joe Mercola, or you could type in Sex, Lies, and the Mercola Tapes, which is the name of my new video.
Thanks so much, Coleman. Let's meet again in a really unique and wonderfully beautiful place.
Let's do it. Maybe a cruise somewhere.
Sounds good to me. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill reporting from the beautiful scene of Banff, Canada.
Hi, I'm Leslie Rosenblood, host of Podcast for Inquiry, the official podcast of the Centre for Inquiry Canada. Every 2 weeks, I bring you a conversation with an expert on some complex subject, which we discuss with intelligence and nuance. The goal is that you come away with more than just a surface-level understanding, as well as an appreciation for a genuine spirit of inquiry. If your intellectual curiosity extends to science, religion, philosophy, economics, humanism, politics, and more, subscribe to Podcast for Inquiry today, available anywhere you get your podcasts. A video form is also available on YouTube on the Centre for Inquiry Canada's channel. I look forward to welcoming you to the inquiring community.
You've probably heard the term pseudoscience used quite a lot in skeptical circles and skeptical interests and investigations and so on. But what is pseudoscience? What does it mean? What are some of the classic examples? Now, I've been thinking about this lately because of my work on the documentary James Randi in Australia, because right at the end of the documentary, he is filmed giving a lecture, part of a lecture, at the Seymour Centre here in Sydney, not too far from the Skeptic Zone studios, where he did psychic surgery, and then he talks to the audience about pseudoscience. In fact, here's a short clip from the documentary.
There seems to be this kind of abnormal science which says that the ordinary rules of logic do not apply to it, that repeatable experiments are not required of it, that the rules can change constantly in let's say, in tune with the times or what has been written in the sensationalist press, and various other anomalies belong to this science, which stamps it to me as a pseudoscience. Pseudoscience can be a very dangerous thing.
And that's a very nice encapsulation of pseudoscience. For me, some of the key aspects to look out for, what we might call special pleading, where in a scientific test, a double-blind test, for example, if you don't get maybe the results you were hoping for, you could be tempted to explain or use justifications, rationalizations for why the test failed. Oh, it must be Tuesday. That's right. This device /claim/power/ability doesn't work on Tuesdays. And we see special pleading classically, as Randi also explains in the documentary, in water dowsing and water divining. In 1980, one of the rationalizations used for failure was one of the diviners said, well, there were walkie-talkies there when we were filming the tests, so walkie-talkies interfere with water divining. They also talk about sunspots. If we get back to what science is, it's a way to understand the world. And this need has given rise to science, of course, but, the flip side has given rise to pseudoscience, pretend science, things that sound sciencey. And one of the ones I remember from television here in Australia for, a decade or two, was a semi-regular guest on various talk shows, was one Paul Fenton Smith, usually doing palm reading. And Paul Fenton Smith, who still has a website, paulfentonsmith.com, is from the Academy of Psychic Sciences. And that's all he needed to do when he went on these various talk shows, mid-morning infomercial shows, that sort of thing. and then he would be billed as coming from the Academy of Psychic Sciences, and of course never question about that.
Welcome back to Mornings. Time to have another look at the fascinating psychic science of palmistry with Paul Fenton-Smith. Paul, good to see you again.
Thank you.
Last time you were on, we asked people to send in emails of their children's hands. We have had such fun this year with enormous response. And as always, yes, we had thousands of emails. So people sent in their kids' hands, and on the phone this morning, Clarissa Hood from Mogo in New South Wales has sent in her child's hands. In fact, she's on the line. Good morning, Clarissa.
And according to the website, since 1985, we have offered certificate courses in tarot card reading, palmistry, astrology, and self-development. Our courses are held on Sundays in Sydney and on weekends interstate. Our tarot, palmistry, and astrology courses are certificate courses involving written and practical exams, while our self-development courses are designed to give you tools for life. And, well, it's the same old. You go there to his website and you can book a reading, 30-minute reading at a distance. Is that like spooky action at a distance? 45-minute reading at a distance. Various books, Activate Your Psychic Ability, Advanced Tarot, Astrology Chart Printed, Interpretation for only $85. Astrology Charts Personal Interpretation, only $220. But I digress. The point here is that this organization is under the banner of Psychic Sciences. Science is a method of inquiry based on observation, experimentation, and the formulation of theories that can be tested and refined over time, tinkered with, looked at, examined, so on. Its foundations lie in the scientific method, the structured approach that emphasizes skepticism, peer review, reproducibility, and openness to revision. All very important. You might think you're on the right track, but a double-blind test could soon steer you in a different direction. As Carl Sagan said, science is self-correcting. When evidence contradicts a theory, that theory is adjusted or disregarded. Sometimes that can take time, as people do like to hang on to their ideas, their theories, the way they think the world should work. Pseudoscience, by contrast, mimics the appearance of science without adhering to its rigors and methodology. It often relies on anecdotal evidence, appeals to tradition or authority, and resists falsification. And of course, if something fails a test, the pseudoscientist will criticize the test and run different tests more favorable to the results he or she is after. One of the central differences between science and pseudoscience lies in testability. Scientific theories must make predictions that can be tested and potentially disproven. Now, the idea of trying very hard to disprove your pet idea is contradictory. It's counterintuitive, I should say, but that's what scientists should do. To the people practicing a pseudoscience, this is not even in the realm of their thinking. Why? I mean, they normally are of the opinion that their belief is firm fact, so why bother trying to disprove it? Another hallmark of pseudoscience is its inability to change. Take homeopathy, for example. Been around for a couple of 100 years, and the basic tenets have simply not changed in all that time. Normal science has changed, it's tweaked, it's improved upon. Pseudoscience often just stays stagnant. While often dismissed as harmless, pseudoscience can have serious consequences. Belief in unproven medical treatments can delay or replace effective care, sometimes with fatal results. Now, here are but a few of the modalities often touted as being scientific. I've heard people talk about the science of astrology, the science certainly of homeopathy. Phrenology used to be considered scientific. Of course, that's reading the bumps on the head. Crystal healing? Now, maybe one of the flag bearers, the poster boys of pseudoscience would certainly be creation science, creationism science. You often hear the term more and more scientists are believing in XYZ, especially when it comes to creationism. I've been hearing that for 40 plus years. Many alternative health modalities, including things like magnet therapy, have been touted as being scientific. And when you go to something like the Mind Body Spirit or the Mind Body Wallet, you'll often see, well, not so much anymore, I'm pleased to say, but you will see machines and mechanisms and devices. For example, we used to see these machines from Russia that claimed that they would scan your body with vibrations and frequencies, and they looked scientific. And an iridologist, for example, I've seen at the Mind Body Wallet fairs, they have big scientific-looking charts. Now, one of the things that concerns me about pseudoscience is how it hoodwinks the public. Like these talk shows, which would have Paul Fenton-Smith from the Academy of Psychic Sciences, and the average viewer may simply just assume that that's a real thing, that this is a scientific organization or a scientific outfit. And of course, if you propose a real scientific test to them, they shy away very quickly. Well, there we are, a brief look at pseudoscience. And of course, these days it's easy to find out if something is considered to be a pseudoscience. You can simply ask Google or your favorite AI. But of course, in 1980, when James Randi gave that lecture, you had to know, you had to look it up in, dare I say, a book or something like that. And I guess the lasting message given to us by pseudoscience is that if the tests don't match the theory, reject the tests.
This is Susan Gerbic from Psychics Explained. That's the YouTube channel where we discuss and analyze in great depth all those people who say that they can speak to the dead, all those readings, how they look like they're actually communicating with people. Why do people fall for this? There's a reason. It's much more complicated than you would think. Come to my channel, watch our videos. We would love to have you become part of our conversation. Just visit us on YouTube at Psychics Explained or Psychic Sex Planed on YouTube.
For crying out loud, it's Kat McLeod.
This is Kat McLeod coming to you from the very smoky Edmonton, Canada. I've heard of wedding season, patio season, the holiday season, and of course, hockey season. But did you know that there's also a crop circle season? I didn't, but I would have assumed it would be in the autumn when the crops are ready to be harvested, not in the spring when crops are just starting to sprout. Apparently, the season started early this year when crop circles popped back up in the news, with a report of a circle with a 120-foot diameter appearing in a canola field in Dorset, England on the 11th of April, which was followed by a report of a circle with a 180-foot diameter appearing in a barley crop in Wiltshire, England, a few weeks later. The Gallop's crop circle in Wiltshire was first spotted on the 15th of May. It's strikingly beautiful and located not far from Stonehenge. This is a popular area for crop circles and UFO sightings. The design consists of a diamond with a Celtic knot overlaid in the center of the circle. The center of the off-axis square and outer edges of the circle are perfectly aligned with the field roads or tram lines, which are the rows that tractors or other equipment use in the field for seeding, spraying, and harvesting. This makes it convenient for people to visit the circle and not disrupt the design by leaving tracks in the surrounding crops. Those aliens sure are considerate. And yes, the farmers of this barley field are allowing people to access this crop circle. for the suggested donation of £10 to their GoFundMe fundraiser that was set up 2 days after the crop circle appeared to help cover the devastating damage to their barley crop, which, according to the GoFundMe organizer, has endured one of the most difficult growing seasons due to the weather, and now this loss of a wonderful crop. Which is a little contradictory. Anyway. You'll be happy to learn, dear listeners, that the fundraiser has already raised over £800 towards their nearly £7,000 goal. It's a shame the UFO didn't leave something more valuable to help these farmers, instead of just leaving a stunning design. I guess their crop insurance didn't cover crop circles. As someone who has lived her life on the Canadian prairies, spending summers on my grandfather's ranch, I have always had an affection for crop circles. These were big news when I was a kid, and I always wanted to see one for myself. The way the media portrayed them to be so mysterious, how they quickly appeared overnight, and how the patterns were far too intricate to be created by human hands. The wheat stalks were often only bent and not broken, which was a sure sign that this was created by something otherworldly. Of course, this assumes that the farmers monitor their entire fields daily, and obviously the designs would never appear in broad daylight because clearly there's no mystique in that. Crop circles were first reported in the 1960s, but became media sensations in the 1980s, with speculation on whether these were somehow formed naturally or by extraterrestrials. The media in the 1980s liked to sensationalize everything. Could these designs be created by radiation? Some kind of magnetic force? Was it government or military testing? Something paranormal, extraterrestrial visitations, or some kind of natural weather event? Of course, many of them were attributed to Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley, who confessed in 1991 to creating hundreds of crop circles in the UK, with their hijinks beginning in 1976. But what about the saucer nests found in Canada and Australia? They couldn't be responsible for those, I hear cereologists cry. For those unfamiliar, a cereologist is someone who studies crop circles and believes they have paranormal origins, dismissing hoaxers' admissions. Those simple circles were not landing sites for UFOs. They were most certainly caused by the natural phenomenon, whirlwinds. I suppose that some people don't want to believe in reality, as it's mundane, and they're drawn to hoaxes and mythology, eager to suspend belief in hopes that there's something greater, exciting and fascinating at play. In 2002, cereologists were excited at a reported sighting of crop circles near Pike Lake in Saskatchewan, Canada. It was later verified that these circles were in fact piles of manure dumped by a local farmer after cleaning out his barns. What they had found were not crop circles, but actual BS. Not all circle makers are hoaxers, of course, trying to convince people of alien visitation. Some purport it is an art form akin to graffiti, and they call themselves cereal artists. And that's cereal as in the food. These cereal artists display their talents in fields instead of on walls. There have been contests over the years to see who could create the most elaborate circles, including a 2002 documentary called Crop Circles: Mystery in the Field, produced by the Discovery Channel, where 5 MIT students were commissioned to make and analyze a crop circle. They have become very popular. In fact, some companies hire circle makers for commercial and promotional purposes. Ahead of the 2012 Summer Games in London, there were a series of crop circles forming the Olympic rings. Some could even be seen by passengers flying via Heathrow Airport. An article in Live Science reports, quote, perhaps the cutest crop circles to make international news were simple ones spotted in Tasmania's legally grown opium field in 2009. The opium is grown for the pharmaceutical industry, which uses the plants to make drugs such as morphine. According to the Australian State's Attorney General, wallabies were getting into the fields and hopping in circles after eating the opium poppies and getting, quote, high as a kite, end quote, NBC News reported that year. The disoriented wallabies were stomping on the poppies, causing crushed circular patches, end quote. Apparently, this has also happened a number of times with sheep who got into the poppy fields and also wandered in circles when intoxicated by the opium. I would like to believe that the adoration of crop circles helped inspire the trend that began in the 1990s in North America and England of corn mazes, or mazes, if you will. These elaborate labyrinths that are plowed into a field of corn allow people to run amok amongst the crops while they try and find their way through a puzzling and entertaining experience. So, sorry. While crop circles may be pretty to look at, they are not messages from aliens or some form of paranormal phenomenon. They're easy to explain and fun to make. This autumn, I will be heading out with Dr. Rodney Schmaltz's psychology class again, this time to make our very own crop circle. Be sure to follow the Skeptic Zone social media accounts for photos of that in the coming months. Signing off from Kitty Corner Studio, this is Kat McLeod.
Hello, Smart Women. This week on the Why Smart Women podcast, I talked to Coleman Watts, who was knee-deep, actually neck-deep, in the QAnon cult, and he managed to extricate himself. How did he do it? Critical thinking, and he's now a science communicator. It's an extraordinary story. Do tune in. Talk soon.
Time once again to go back to the digital archives, no matter where they are around the world or on other planets, who knows, where we can look at the past. We can stay here in the future, look towards the past, look back to the past to find out what people were writing about the paranormal, the supernatural, that sort of thing, in newspapers and magazines and so on, now safely digitized for us to raid. Well, maybe that's a bit strong for us to use to research. And this week we're going to look at an oldie but a goodie. ESP, extrasensory perception, that antiquated term now superseded by, well, psychic really covers most claims, I think, the term psychic. People no longer claim, I have ESP, they will say, I am psychic. And according to my records, we haven't covered this topic in Trove for 3 years, so it's about time. Of course, ESP is a little bit vague. Well, it generally means that one has the power to read somebody's mind, although you don't really hear mind reading much anymore either. Anyway, let's go back to the year 1974 on the 19th of July in the Ledger. The Ledger, I'm not exactly sure where the Ledger is from, nevertheless. Soviets researching ESP, a Ledger special feature inside the USSR, Part 8. Editor's note. President Nixon has recently compared his third summit meeting with Soviet Communist Party leader Leonid I. Brezhnev reinforcing belief that leaders in both Washington and Moscow are interested in keeping lines of communication open. One way for détente to work is for the Russian and American people to get to know each other better. This series by freelance writer Elaine Milling provides a look at Soviet society. Scores of scientists and social scientists at universities and research centres all over the world are endeavouring to unravel, through scientific means, the still inexplicable states relating to extrasensory perception, ESP, precognition, telepathy, and other paranormal experiences. I'll break in here quickly to say, logical fallacy? Anybody? You at the back? Yes! It's begging the question. The statement assumes these powers exist in the first place. And don't forget you can listen to lots of logical fallacies with Michelle Bickersma. Just go to the Skeptic Zone webpage, skepticzone.tv, scroll down on the right of the page, and you'll see logical fallacies. We read on. When and if the breakthrough is achieved, the political and cultural implications will be vast, because, as one US scientist said, it may well furnish the key to controlling the minds of others. As many others who are interested in psychic phenomena, Adamenko's own experiences first sparked his curiosity. Death, he explained, is another example of an altered state of consciousness. Although a special case, I had a friend who survived clinical death. He heard the conversation of the doctor pronouncing him dead and remembered it upon revival. Alla, his wife and educator, is now pursuing an advanced degree, greeted us at the door. A friend from Tokyo was there too. Before we ate, endless songs and toasts were exchanged. The Japanese friend, at my urging, sang Ochikonye. I'm not sure how that's pronounced in Russian, but there you go. A favourite Russian song I had learnt from white Russian friends in America, his native language. Then the host and hostess sang to me in Russian. According to Viktor Adamenko, people can often be trained to accomplish similar psychokinetic experiments, such as moving small objects through energy released by the mind. To our amazement, Alla gave us a demonstration by moving an empty cigar holder tube about on a glass-top table without touching it, simply by using mental concentration. Or we might suspect she probably used her breath. We read on. She repeated the experiment with a ping-pong ball and a larger object. Her energy level peaked to the point where I actually saw her momentarily light a 9-watt bulb when pressed over the object she was concentrating on. Psychokinesis can be taught to some people, Adamenko said. Yoga is a prerequisite. On the other hand, the strain to the heart is very great, and because of this, Alla will not be able to continue with these experiments indefinitely. An International Association of Psychotronics is currently exploring and developing scientific theories for these unusual events. Although this group is not currently recognized by the USSR Academy of Science, it seems inevitable that before too long it will be, perhaps according to some scientific observers, by 1975. Afterwards, as we all gathered on the terrace of their pleasant and comfortable apartment overlooking the sights and sounds of the city, far below the stars and moon of a clear Moscow sky, it seemed more important to explore, to investigate why, than to flatly state such things cannot be. A very sympathetic look at some what appears to be, by this vague description, simple conjuring tricks. Again, this is a great case of, I wish I could have been there at the time. And let me say, yes, this was published 55 years ago. You'd think by now we would have definite proof of this psychokinetic ability. Now let's look to see what the Waycross Journal-Herald had to say on January the 14th, 1984. Nova, Eyes Case of ESP. Is it possible to read someone's mind or to see into the future? Most scientists would say no. But in the past decade, a number of researchers have conducted systematic laboratory research into extrasensory perception, or ESP. In, quote, The Case for ESP, end quote, airing Tuesday at 8 p.m. on Georgia Public Television, Nova examines the claims for and against paranormal phenomena and looks at some startling applications in the fields of archaeology, criminology, and warfare. From Victorian parlour games to today's psychic bestsellers, the claims for ESP have been dismissed by skeptics as fraudulent nonsense. But in the last 10 years, some scientists have put paranormal phenomena to the laboratory test, claiming astonishing results. In The Case for ESP, Nova reports on recent findings in telepathy, precognition, psychokinesis, moving objects by remote control, and clairvoyance. In a deeply relaxed state, subjects have been able to describe images transmitted by senders in another room. One physicist's experiment of subjects control random flashing lights, apparently through mental concentration alone, has been duplicated successfully by 19 other scientists. At the Stanford Research Institute in California, scientists have conducted extensive laboratory studies with psychics who are able to describe the surroundings of people in unknown locations. Clairvoyance or remote viewing is of particular interest for detective work. Nova looks at Mobius, a consulting service with 10 psychics on the payroll that locates missing persons, helps to solve murders, and finds archaeological sites by remote viewing. The Case for ESP also considers the military applications of remote viewing at the Stanford Research Institute, where one government-funded project tests the ability of psychics to describe army bases, islands, and the insides of buildings as no satellite can do. But some scientists object to the military uses of parapsychology, while others dispute the validity of all psychic research. Both in the laboratory and at large, ESP appears to challenge the understood rules of modern science. In The Case for ESP, Nova looks at the evidence for and against extrasensory perception, a phenomenon that may eventually push science to new frontiers, expanding our notions of mind and matter. Now, this is one documentary I was not familiar with, and a quick Google search, well, here it is on YouTube. Nova.
At the same time, 5 miles away, shielded from all known means of communication, physicist and psychic researcher Russell Targ sat with a man who said he could describe where the car had gone.
Ooh, oh no. That means I'm going to have to watch it now. Oh, dear. Well, less than 10 years later, Nova also produced James Randi's documentary called The Secrets of the Psychics, which is a very worthwhile documentary indeed. But, dear, I'll have to download this one and keep it for the archives. And if you're interested, I will add a link to this documentary in this week's show notes. And what's even worse, there seems to be another version of the documentary, which goes for an hour and a half. It says here, uncut 1983 BBC film. Oh boy. Now, what does the Sarasota Journal on the 28th of September 1971 have for us? Lunar crewman touts ESP. San Francisco, Associated Press. Astronaut Edgar D. Mitchell says extrasensory perception should be studied seriously and receive, quote, a respectable place in the scientific community, end quote. Mitchell, who conducted an unofficial ESP experiment on the Apollo 14 moon mission, discusses his feelings in an interview published in the October issue of Psychic, a bi-monthly magazine headquartered in San Francisco. I intend to use all my efforts as time permits, Mitchell says, bringing ESP into a respectable place in the scientific community. Mitchell says he had become very dissatisfied with traditional philosophy and theology. I knew there had to be a better order somewhere. and for 2 years before Apollo 14 had conducted experiments with friends. The results of the experiments in space, he said, were roughly about as successful as those he had conducted before leaving Earth, high enough to indicate more than chance probability. Mitchell said help was given him in analysing the results by Dr. J.B. Ryan of the Foundation for Research on the Nature of Man, Durham, North Carolina, and Dr. Carlos Ossis of the American Society for Psychical Research, New York. Mitchell holds a doctorate in aeronautics and astronautics from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He says he thinks it is vitally important for man to find out what ESP and other paranormal experiences are, rather than rely upon uninformed theories. And finally, from 1995, on the 30th of November, in the pages of the Canberra Times, scientific study proves ESP works for some, and proves is in inverted commas. Washington, Wednesday. Some people might have a paranormal ability to visualize hidden or distant objects without actually seeing them, a CIA-commissioned study made public yesterday has reported. The study, by the American Institute for Research, a private Washington social science research firm, says, quote, statistically significant, end quote, results have been observed in laboratory experiments to test extrasensory perception, which it called remote viewing. The Central Intelligence Agency commissioned the study at the request of the State Appropriations Committee, keen to know whether more government research into parapsychology was warranted to give US spy agencies an extra arrow in their quiver. The findings were made public after they were cited by ABC News. David Christian, a CIA spokesman, declined to discuss examples of CIA use of so-called psychic spying, but said most of its research in the 1970s was experimental. The Defense Intelligence Agency, which coordinates military intelligence, had no comment. A statistics professor from the University of California, Davis, Jessica Utz, who worked on the study and specializes in evaluating parapsychological research, said the data she viewed for the CIA study had produced the most credible evidence to date that humans were capable of paranormal psychic feats. At this stage, using the standards applied to any other area of science, the case for psychic functioning has been scientifically proven. Well, there you go. So, just about 30 years ago, the case for psychic functioning was scientifically proven. How about that? Can I read your mind? Do you have ESP? What other mysteries are we yet to discover in the pages of newspapers from the past? Well, we can find out when we visit Trove at trove.nla.gov.au, and we put in our search, because you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Thank you to my lovely, beautiful, wonderful people who contribute via Patreon or PayPal at skepticzone.tv, and you can join that crew for only maybe $5 a month, scarcely over $1 an episode. You can help with the costs associated with the Skeptic Zone and keep the show ticking over. I'm going to be very busy in the next week or two. I'm off to the States in late this month. At the end of this month, I'm off to the States. So I'm doing a lot of pre-recording. Oh yes, getting lots of things ready to go on my trip. But fear not, the show will come out every week. And I'm looking forward to seeing lots of skeptical friends and meeting new skeptical friends in the Bermuda Triangle on the Skeptoid Adventure Cruise. Thank you to all the people watching the documentary James Randi in Australia. And the address for that is tinyurl.com/Randi Australia, one word. And we hope to have a public screening of that movie, probably at Skeptics in the Pub in August. So keep an eye out for that. Those people who come to Skeptics in the Pub, make sure that you're signed in and up to date on the meetup group, because depending on what we do, it might be a case of securing your seat for that event. More on that when details come to hand. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from the Skeptic Zone studios here in Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.
Hello everybody, this is Adrienne Hill, and right now I'm standing right beside the Bow River in Banff, BC. BC, oh my god. By the Bow River in Banff, Alberta. Let's pull a Susan right off the bat. And that last comment, if you want to use this in the after comments, Richard, is because Susan called this the State Park, Banff State Park, when it's actually Banff National Park. So that's why I was laughing about that.
I hear Canada has a nice new governor as well.
Yes, indeed. Anyhow. God. Adrienne giggles is true to form here.
Thank you to those people who listen after the music for the dice game. I won't disappoint. I'm going to roll the dice. I got a D10. Ooh, it's lovely. It's a green. It's like a lime green one, translucent. Ooh, we're going to roll this 3 times, probably 4 times, and you use your psychic, predicting, magic, special powers, or dumb luck, and guess the numbers. I'm going to guess ahead. I'm going to guess 5, 6, 10, and 7. They're my predictions. Okay, first roll. Here it comes. 9. Oh well. Okay, next roll. Predict away. Here it comes. 1. Not very psychic today. Next roll. Here it comes. 4. Oh, come on. I've got to get at least 1 right. I mean, come on, really. Last one. 3. Well, I'm not buying a lottery ticket this week. The winning numbers: 9, 1, 4, and 3.